We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi everyone, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, and this is Weed Talk News.
And I'm Curt Dalton, the founder of Cannabis.net.
Today on Weed Talk News, the Bay State, Massachusetts, our home state, has released over 600,000 previously confiscated vape cartridges. So Curt, my question to you is, if they're all tested and they're now back into the market, would you use one of these cartridges?
Absolutely, Jimmy. I go to the dollar store, paper towels or paper towels. And ironically, people will probably say, I don't want to touch them. These are probably the most tested and safe and secure cartridges in the state of Massachusetts history because they've been so overly tested. You'll probably get a discount somewhere, but I would have no problem using them.
And of course, right now, dispensary owners are trying to figure out, are they going to put them back into circulation? Are they going to destroy them? Or are they going to discount them?
So as far as we're concerned, and we're always concerned about the product and the quality and et cetera, the product being as old as it is, we will take the product and remediate the product, basically clean it up. And after it's clean, we'll send it out for testing. It'll come back. It should show, it'll show no contaminants of any kind, no lead, et cetera. And then for us, we'll probably end up just using it in our edibles once we know that it's a clean product for that. I personally don't have any interest in putting it back in carts and trying to sell it that way.
And obviously, Curt, I think I understand that you'll take that discount, won't you?
Jimmy, as my great-grandma used to say, if the milk's not expired, you can still drink it. So yes, I would.
As long as the bread isn't blue. Okay, meanwhile, our friends at Rev Clinics are going to be a little lighter in their revenue statements this month. It seems that the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission fined the medical dispensary $125,000. It seems back in December of 2018, a former employee did not properly report a test result for a batch of concentrates created for vaping. Now, those results showed a higher than allowed level of ethanol. At that time, the metric accounting system for all products used by the state had not been introduced. When Rev Clinics discovered that the ethanol levels from that batch were indeed higher than they're supposed to be, they reported it to the state commission. They also hired an independent tester and an investigator and shared all those results with the state. So since September of 2019, Rev Clinics has been working on resolving this issue and now has accepted that fine. Rev Clinics put out this statement on Thursday, August 6th. Patient and consumer safety were not compromised during this time, and we fully accept responsibility for our shortcomings in 2019, as well as the fine levied by the CCC, which is now being announced publicly. Curt, I guess when you get caught making a mistake, it's good to own up to it.
Yeah, and $125,000 based on Massachusetts legal prices and taxes. That's about 5 pre-rolls and maybe a little bit of shatter. So I think they'll be okay. And boy, it sure looks like Rev Clinics has bullseye around their neck for a while here. And that might be, maybe hopefully this is the end of that.
Absolutely. And I do salute them. And obviously they are a supporter of our efforts here. But I do salute them for investigating it independently, hiring a science person to check on them all, and also cooperating with the CCC. And I'll also give them a little credit for actually fighting for their rights to at least say, hey, look, we didn't have a system to report it to, and we fired that employee. So as a business, I think they acted responsibly.
Oh, absolutely. Even more so than most businesses who aren't under a microscope would do. So kudos to them. It was a mistake. It was an employee that's no longer there, and they did the right thing, owned up to it, and now you have to move on after the fine.
Now, unfortunately, we won't be able to bring you Deborah Borchart's Green Market Report this week because the tropical storm Isaias knocked out her power in New York. Meanwhile, the state of Michigan is considering allowing adult-use recreational dispensaries to open a year ahead of schedule in that state. It would be in November of this year, but it's only being considered. Only 60 communities in Michigan have okayed adult use dispensaries, while 1,400 cities and towns have opted out. Their program, of course, launched in 2019 of November. So, Curt, another one of these NIMBYs, not in my backyard, huh?
It definitely gets interesting when the state tax revenue starts to get distributed among these towns that have said no in these districts, and they all want a piece of the marijuana tax revenue later. It's a little bit of the lottery equation in some areas, that the towns that don't have lottery allowed, but yet they like those lottery proceeds. And when you told me that Deb got taken out by ISIS, I said, wow, they don't like me. But luckily it was just a storm in upstate New York. She lost power, she's safe. But the good news is Phil Adams of Vote Pro podcast in DC is running from ISIS and is very safe. So let's go to him now with our Washington Marijuana Minute.
Hi, Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast, here with the Weed Talk News DC Report. Cannabis legalization will not be part of the 2020 Democratic Party campaign platform. This week, Democratic National Committee delegates rejected a proposal to include legalization in the platform by a vote of 105 to 60. Instead, the platform calls for decriminalization of cannabis. Decriminalization is the approach favored by presumptive nominee Joe Biden. The draft platform is yet to be ratified by the full DNC. The COVID pandemic has seen the legal cannabis industry expanding its market share versus illegal weed sales, according to Politico. Social distancing has left many cannabis customers less inclined toward direct personal interactions, particularly with people they don't know. Many are also more leery of consuming products from unregulated sources. Minnesota Senator Tina Smith has introduced federal legislation that would remove cannabis from the Controlled Substances Act. Smith's bill would regulate cannabis like alcohol and tobacco, granting regulatory authority to the FDA. The legislation now sits with the Senate Judiciary Committee, chaired by Republican Lindsey Graham. Currently, the bill does not include any co-sponsors. That's the Weed Talk News DC report for this week. I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast.
Next up, we've got a few new research studies on cannabis released this week. The big one is by the American Heart Association that concluded that smoking cannabis could be harmful to your cardiovascular system. Now, while that came as no surprise to the medical community, the AHA did call for the rescheduling of cannabis from a Schedule I drug in order to open up the doors for more research. We talked to our Weed Talk News medical correspondent, Dr. Ryan Zaklin, about this report.
If you're talking about, you have to define it. So if you're saying that excessive smoking of cannabis puts you at an increased risk of heart attack or stroke, first of all, what is the risk? What's the percentage? Does that outweigh the benefit of maybe somebody who is more relaxed and unwound and, right, they're not, I don't know. But it's just, to me, to have a blatant headline that marijuana puts you at risk for heart attack or stroke is just, is a little irresponsible. And it's sending the wrong message. And the fact of the matter is that even as an intoxicant, cannabis is a choice intoxicant. I mean, we didn't even talk about edibles. So what if you're just eating it? Right? I mean, that's, even to ask people who came to the ER that had a heart attack or stroke and they were using cannabis, well, what were they using? So, and we didn't even talk about CBD or low dose THC. So anyway, I mean, to me, I see it. I'm aware of the fact that there is an association. There may be a drop in blood pressure. There may be some ill benefits from some amount of cannabis use that seems to be on the excessive side and may put you at an increased risk of heart attack or stroke. But that certainly doesn't mean that you should avoid it. And it definitely doesn't mean you should not use it as medicine. And it may not mean that you shouldn't use it orally or even use a small amount.
I mean, who knew Mark Ruffalo knew that much about weed? That is impressive all the way. And obviously, Jimmy, this headline was total clickbait. First of all, CNN refuses to use capital letters in their headlines. And if you do read the article, it just calls for more research. We need to deschedule it. And the article barely mentioned that any type of smoking, anything may be bad to your heart. And whoever did the headline for this, the editor just wanted a clickbait article about reefer madness and marijuana, and it's a disgrace.
And Curt, you're someone who understands the power of a headline, and when I saw the headline, "Weed is not good for your heart," I flipped out on that. I was like, well, duh. I mean, the whole point is it's a cannabis plant and there are medicinal qualities to this plant. Smoking is not good for your heart. We get that. But I'm not going to go out and smoke a pack of joints. In fact, with all the THC that's in it now, you couldn't smoke a pack of joints, right?
Well, I saw what happened to you after one joint in Jamaica, so I would suggest you don't do that. But in the same vein, orange juice is bad for heartburn. I mean, I guess, is there going to be a ban against orange juice and vitamin C? So again, headline clickbait, it just tells you what CNN audience wants to hear and see about this subject. And you just know that they run on the conservative side, and if they put an honest headline out that, we need more research, American Heart Association says we need more research on cannabis, that's not going to get very many clicks. That's boring. Let's say it's bad for your heart. And so actually 3 people texted me that article too, based on the headline right away.
There you go. Well, another study that came out this week is from Colorado. The biennial Healthy Kids Colorado survey shows that 20.6% of high school students and 5.2% of middle school students used cannabis over the past 30 days. That's actually a 1.2% increase than the last biennial survey in 2017, but it's still lower than the last pre-legalization report in 2011, when that group's consumption rate was 22%. So Curt, this study was done last year, and to me, it seems that overall consumption is down among kids in Colorado, a legal state.
Well, one, it shows Jeff Sessions had no idea what he was talking about when it came to teen and young people use with legalization. And 2, we actually have an article about this coming out tomorrow on cannabis.net, but we'll jump the shark and we'll talk about what the elements are. Is this, if everyone's doing it and it's readily accessible, it's not that cool to kids. They got to find something else to do that's cool and rebellious. So certainly blows the reefer madness, like we just talked about, type articles out of the water, that you're going to have a bunch of teens and kids, zombies walking around, having brain damage from all this marijuana. So it's not true. And
what needs to happen is more research and more education. Now, the other part of that report, and it really wasn't in the report, it was just the reporter adding this, that THC percentage in cannabis was 6.7% in 2008, and in Colorado now the average is 55%. So they too urge more research. And Curt, isn't that similar to a percentage of alcohol proof in liquor?
It's really more of a marketing ploy, and we've got a couple articles that came up with this. The scientific test, dispensaries and growers can charge more if it's a higher THC rating. So there's a thing called lab shopping, meaning you'll take your bud to 3 different labs. Whoever gives you the highest THC, that goes on the window. That's what we sell. So how much is a marketing ploy and how much is actually that much stronger? It's kind of a debate, but most science says you can adjust different terpenes and cannabinoid levels, but you're really not getting that 150 proof rum like you would get in a liquor store. And it's just not, the bang is not worth it. It's more of a marketing and an upsell.
Interesting. And of course, it also depends on your tolerance and your metabolism. And that is very difficult to judge from one human to another, right?
Correct, yes.
All right. Hey, let's go north of the border to Solomon, Israel now for the Canadian Cannabis Report. Solomon?
I'm Solomon Israel from MJBIZ Daily International, and this is the Weed Talk News Canadian Cannabis Report. Last year, CanTrust had its federal cannabis licenses suspended after it was caught growing marijuana in unlicensed parts of a facility. Now, the company says the last of those licenses has been reinstated. CanTrust will restart manufacturing at its Vaughan, Ontario facility and return to selling marijuana again later this year. But the company isn't out of hot water yet. It remains under creditor protection and has no meaningful revenue. Canada's federal government is giving cannabis companies a 6-month extension on a September deadline to pay an annual regulatory fee. That's in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Essentially, the delayed deadline acts as a short-term loan to the industry. Companies who hold cannabis production licenses in Canada must pay that annual fee, which is meant to recoup the government's costs for regulating the industry. And British Columbia has changed its cannabis store regulations to let customers pay for purchases online or by phone before coming into a store for pickup. The province says the change was made at the request of private sector retailers in response to COVID-19 concerns. The BC government also said it's considering allowing full home delivery for those retailers. You can read all those stories and more at MJBizDaily.com. I'm Solomon Israel from Marijuana Business Daily.
One more story out of Michigan, and it involves a 69-year-old inmate named Michael Thompson. It seems 20 years ago he was busted for selling weed and has been, doing his sentence in jail. Well, now Michael Thompson has COVID, and the Michigan Attorney General there, Dana Nessel, is asking the governor, Gretchen Whitmer, to commute the sentence of Michael Thompson. We all hope these things have to happen at some point, Curt. You have to do right, correct?
And this goes right to Steve D'Angelo's last prisoner project, and that, a cannabis or marijuana offense shouldn't be a death sentence in the time of COVID. So there's been a lot of people pushing and trying to publicize this case to get him freed, as well as anyone else that, is at risk of COVID in a very, packed in penitentiary. Nonviolent offenders, just, a marijuana or cannabis offense should be released at this point. And hopefully Steve and his movement, we keep getting it bigger and bigger.
And it seems like we have another story every week coming out of the Last Prisoner Project, and that's all good. Now, our final story tonight takes us back to Disney World. You might remember 2 years ago, a 69-year-old woman, a grandma, was improperly arrested at Disney World for having a legally prescribed CBD medical pen in her purse. It had no THC in it. It was a CBD pen. That arrest was dismissed after the grandma spent 12 hours in an Orlando, Florida jail, and now she is suing Disney for millions of dollars. And she's retained attorney Ben Crump, one of the nation's highest profile civil rights lawyers, who said, why in the world would Mickey Mouse arrest grandma? Right, Curt?
I mean, they don't call it the magic mushroom kingdom for nothing. So if you can't bring your CBD oil into Disney, I mean, what's the point? It's roller coasters. So it'll be interesting to see. This is obviously going to be a settlement, and we'll see what Disney's new policy is. More interesting going out the other side for CBD from hemp. And then she had a prescription. So that's a whole new little issue, because does that open the window for THC? If it's medical marijuana prescribed, does THC come in that window if a judge decides, or a settlement at Disney too?
Well, that'll wrap it up for this week's Weed Talk News. I'm the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, Jimmy Young.
And I'm the founder of Cannabis.net, Curt Dalton.
Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Weed Talk Now, Weed Talk News, and In the Weeds are all available on most major podcast distributors like iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and our friends at clnsmedia.com and our flagship, Cannabis.net. So subscribe, share, and like our videos on all the social media networks out there, including LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the WeedTube, and YouTube. Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media, supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.